Okay, the iPhone 12 mini. So I've been using this little guy since it came out. So it's been about 4 months now. And before I bought it, I was always really curious about just how small it would feel in my hands. It's kind of like when Samsung first came out with their Note line of phones. We didn't really know what a giant, like 6 point something inch phone was gonna feel like. But now, like, phones are all getting so big that it's kind of going the opposite direction. And a lot of us are curious, what does it actually feel like to use such a tiny phone? Well, in today's video, I'm going to explain exactly why I switched to the iPhone 12 mini from my other Android phones and what it's like using such a small phone on a day-to-day basis. Okay, so first of all, why I switched. Well, it's kind of hard to talk about why I switched over from Android without talking about all of the proprietary Apple stuff. And whereas I don't want to make this video about Android versus Apple, I do need to talk about some of the things that kind of sucked me back into the iPhone lineup. So one of the biggest factors was the Apple Watch. And of course, you can't really use an Apple Watch on any Android phone. So in switching back to the iPhone 12 mini, I was able to put back my Apple Watch. And a couple of other reasons were like just Apple Pay, iMessage, all of these things that we kind of take for granted when we use the iPhone, but when we switch to Android, we kind of miss them. And whereas there are Android counterparts, I've always felt like they're just not as good, or at least not as many people use them as, let's say iMessage for iPhone. A couple of other things that I really enjoyed with the iPhone and that I really missed when I was on Android were things like AirDrop and handoff. Like I have an iPad, and if I want to copy something on my iPhone and then transfer it over to my iPad to paste, well, I can do that without installing any third-party software or anything like that. I use a messaging platform called WeChat, and I know a lot of Chinese or Asian people do as well. And they just updated it on your iPhone where a lot of the emojis on WeChat now have these like full screen effects. And it's such a trivial thing, but in this, world of like COVID lockdown and pandemic living, these little updates, all my friends with iPhones will approach me and say, hey, look, I have this new emoji that, shakes your whole screen when you drop a bomb emoji, but it hasn't come to Android yet. And I don't know if it ever will come to Android. So those are like the little things. There's also Fitness Plus. So I've switched over from Freeletics, which is a fitness app, I guess on both platforms, over to Fitness Plus, and they gave like a 3-month trial. It's all right, but it integrates well with your Apple Watch. So I know these are not really features that are specific to the iPhone 12 mini, and I'll get onto those later, but these are a lot of the deciding factors as to what made me change from Android. And the last thing is just AirPods. I have the AirPods Pro, and they integrate so much better with the iPhone. And whereas, yes, they do connect via Bluetooth to Android phones, you aren't able to change a lot of their settings, just like the noise cancellation or isolation, and just some other things. It integrates better with Apple. Okay, now that that's out of the way, aside from all the proprietary stuff, there are a lot of things about this tiny little form factor that I really like. And without actually holding this little phone in your hands, it's really hard to grasp just what this means, in terms of day-to-day use. Okay, so first let's talk about the form factor. Now, the screen, I would say, is big enough. Like it's an OLED screen, so you still get the really nice deep blacks that you would with most Android phones. The refresh rate isn't superb, it's just standard 60 Hertz, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But the form factor, it's really thin and it's really light, and that's exactly what you're going for this phone. And if you're worried about media consumption, like if you're the type like me to watch videos or whatever in bed, you shouldn't be, because it has dual stereo speakers, and the speakers are plenty loud. And the screen, whereas it's a small form factor, but I think it's big enough, especially for this type of like in your hand, one-handed viewing. And a lot of people like to hold the phone like this. At least this is how I hold it. I don't know anybody that kind of holds it like this in bed, right? Like we don't watch videos like this. We usually watch with the pinky underneath. And it's such a small thing to notice, but when you have a big Android phone and you do that for like half an hour or something like that, your pinky either gets a little indent in it or it gets a little bit, fatigued. But it doesn't with this. I can literally watch this for hours on end, just like this, and it just doesn't get tired. And I know a lot of us will lie in bed with the phone like above our heads, right? This is much less likely to get dropped on your face than a heavier Android phone, and it feels a lot more stable. And because it has these flat edges and the screen is completely flat, you're not prone to accidental touches when you go into one-handed mode. And of course, you can reach pretty much all corners of the phone without having to shimmy your hands at all. And it is 5G enabled, even though most of us don't live in areas where 5G is actually like broadcasted, but for when it is 5G enabled. So overall, this form factor of this phone, I can't really fault it. Like, I really like it. The build quality is good. It's standard Apple. It has wireless charging. The back is made out of glass. So one of the main factors that we all consider when purchasing a phone nowadays is the camera. So I would say that the cameras on the iPhone 12 mini are just fine. Like they're perfectly usable. And I always say this, but the best camera that there is the one that you have on you when you need to take that photo. And I haven't once had this phone stutter, and I've used it, throughout these Canadian winters. I put it in the snow. It's been really cold and really hot at times. It's never frozen on me. It's never not taken a photo on me, and it has HDR. I think it takes great photos, and I think it's very comparable to any flagship Android out there. And of course, maybe the Pro models will be slightly better, but I think for the most of us that are not professional photographers with our phones, this camera setup will be more than sufficient. And the only thing that I would fault for it is the storage. So I got the 64GB version because that's what was available at the time, but it's not enough. Like, this is 2021, we should not have a phone with 64GB of storage. I think the minimum would have to be 128, and whereas iCloud does do their little trickery to try to move your storage around, it really hinders like the usage of the phone, because you'll try to send somebody a photo and then it'll have to download from iCloud first before they can receive the photos. So one thing to keep in mind is if you get this phone, it's a good idea to get the larger storage options, because it doesn't have expandable storage anyways. And the last thing I want to talk about in terms of the phone itself is the battery life. So the battery life, a lot of people were worried about, because with the smaller phone, you have less space to put in a bigger battery, obviously. So, but Apple and iOS is so well optimized with their hardware and their software that it almost matches Android. And yes, the Android battery life, and I mean Android, like most Android phones, like the OnePlus 8 or other flagship phones nowadays, they have huge batteries. They have like 4,500 milliamps, 5,000 milliamps. And the iPhone mini has a much smaller battery relative to that, but I'm able to get full day battery usage out of this. And it doesn't bother me to the point where it's like, oh, this is substantially less battery life than the Android counterparts. It hasn't hindered my like daily routine. The only thing I would complain about is it still has the Lightning port, so I have to have a cable dedicated specifically to this phone. But other than that, battery life, a solid 5-6 hours of screen on time. It lasts me from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. with maybe 20% charge left. And I'm, I would say an average user of the phone. I would go on YouTube, go on social media. I have it connected to my Apple Watch. So yeah, I would say if battery life was a big consideration of yours, don't be concerned. I think it's fine. And it charges really fast. It charges pretty much to full in the time it takes me to take like a 20-minute shower, 30-minute shower. Don't quote me on that. I mean, it's not actually those times, but that's what it feels like. It will get you from like, 20% to like 75%. I mean, that's full enough, right? Like if you needed a top up. So overall, battery life is great. I would say though, the downside is the battery depreciates faster. So the battery, it uses more battery when you're playing games and when you're doing intensive tasks than the Android counterpart. So like in like well-optimized situations where you're just, YouTubing or going on social media, I would say, this can take on Android's one-to-one. But if you're playing a game, I would notice that this battery diminishes a lot faster than if you're just playing a game on Android. Like, one game of like Arena of Valor, which is kind of like a League of Legends game on your phone, would decrease it by like maybe 25 to 30%, versus on your Android counterpart with the bigger batteries, it might only go down by 15%. So if you're a heavy gamer, that's something to keep in mind. And okay, so there are a couple flaws that I have to talk about for this phone. And overall, I like it. Like, the pros outweighs the cons. But one of the cons is it's small, and whereas that could be good for a lot of applications, it's bad for some as well. So for example, because it's small, it has less room to dissipate heat. And, if you're using a very intensive application like gaming. So I play Arena of Valor, and every single time I play, about 10 minutes into the game, the screen will dim because it's getting too hot. And if the phone gets too hot, it dims. So it happens when you're playing a game, when you charge it maybe, when it's pretty low and it's charging up the battery, producing a lot of heat, the screen will get dim. And I would say it would dim down to maybe like 25% of max brightness, maybe 40%, something like that, but it's noticeably dim. It's not dim to the point that it's not usable, but it's definitely a flaw of this phone. It's too small. And whereas great for viewing content, great for social media, when you think about playing games on this phone, and of course, who buys an iPhone 12 mini to play games? Well, I don't know, I did. So I thought I could play games on this. So when I play Arena of Valor on it, my hands are just so squished. Like I've kind of gotten used to it, like you can kind of get away with it, but it feels much better on a bigger phone. So if you game a lot, and if this is going to be your only phone and your daily driver, then maybe that's a consideration. It's possible, but I get like a little bit of a thumb cramp if I play for more than like, I don't know, 45 minutes, so like 2-3 games, but on a larger phone, I won't get that thumb cramp. Another bad thing, like I said, is the lightning connector. I have to get one specific cord. I have USB-C cables everywhere around my house, and I have to keep that lightning connector just for this phone, and that's kind of annoying. And the last thing I want to talk about is the SIM card option. So if you look at any of my other videos, I like dual SIM because I have a Chinese SIM card and a North American SIM card. This doesn't have dual SIM, and I think the Hong Kong and Macau variants of this phone have a dual SIM, but it's like one real SIM and then one eSIM. I don't think the North American ones support that, so you're kind of stuck with a single SIM option, whereas the iPhone 12 regular and then all the Pro and Pro Max variants have dual SIM options, at least if you buy the China variants. And most Android phones have dual SIMs nowadays too, at least options for them. So no options for that for the iPhone 12 mini. But yeah, anyways, what do I think about it after using it for like 4 or 5 months now? Well, I really like this phone. There's so many differences between this phone and an Android phone, but I'm going to say that if you didn't try this phone out for yourself and just to see how small it is, you really have to go and pick one up and just to feel it. But I do find myself switching back to Android phones like this OnePlus 8 once in a while, just to get that excitement factor back, because it is exciting to use a bigger phone especially when you're using a small phone. Just like it is exciting to use a small phone when you've been using a big phone for a really long time. But the major things I realized when I switched back to this Android phone from the iPhone 12 mini is one, the display refresh. And this phone has a 90 hertz refresh rate, and the iPhone 12 mini has a 60 hertz refresh rate. It's so noticeable. Like when I used this OnePlus 8 for a couple of months, I got spoiled. I didn't realize how good the refresh rate was. But when I switched back to it and paired with this larger screen, it's like, it just feels like it's twice or 3 times as fast. And the refresh rate is it's so noticeable. But when I don't have it and I'm just using my iPhone 12 mini, do I really miss it? No, not so much. It's just that I notice it when I go back to my Android phones. Another thing is the curved bezels. Well, it makes the screen more immersive. So when I'm watching content on an Android phone, it's like, wow, it's so immersive. You have these curved edges, but at the same time, it's prone to accidental touches. So that's one thing that I don't miss is just accidentally touching the edges every single time I use it. Another bad thing about the iPhone is you don't get parallel apps. And I guess that's just an Apple versus Android thing, but in most Android phones, you can get parallel apps. So if you have multiple social media accounts, multiple chat platforms like WeChat, WhatsApp, you can have 2 accounts on one phone, especially if you have dual SIM, then you can put one for each phone number. But to my knowledge, there's just no way to do that on the iPhone. And there are some third-party apps that kind of mimic that, but it's more like a web-based shortcut or something, and you don't really want to be giving your login information to those apps anyways. So that's definitely a downside. Another downside is the App Store. So I guess it's a pro and a con. Of course, Android, you have your Google Play App Store, and you can download a lot of apps from websites, download their APK files, and then just install it on Android. You can't do that on iPhone. Most apps, I would say, carry across both platforms. Like most major apps that you're going to use are going to be on both platforms. The only downside is because Apple limits their apps specific to a country. If you want to download, let's say, a Chinese app, you have to switch to the Chinese App Store to get that app. And if you don't switch, then you can't download it. If you do switch, then you can no longer update all of your apps that are not from the Chinese App Store, like your North American apps. So it's kind of annoying that you have to keep switching back and forth. That's one thing I noticed when I started using the Mini. And yeah, the last thing I guess is just customizations. I mean, iPhones have widgets now, which is great, but it's not as widget friendly as Android. There's not as many customization options as your Android counterpart. But do I miss it that much? No, not really. Okay, so overall, should you buy the iPhone 12 mini? Well, I would say yes. I would say if you're kind of on the edge about it, and if you're thinking about switching from Android to iPhone, the number one deciding factor should be the form factor. Side by side, this is what it looks like, right? It's not that big of a deal on camera. It's smaller. And when I look at other videos, that's how it's portrayed as well. But in real life, that's not what it feels like. Like, I would say in real life, it's more like this, like this thing is tiny. When you use it, it's like playing around with this little, this tiny little toy. And this thing is like a proper big phone. And then this is the OnePlus 8. So in real life, this is like the scale difference, in my mind. So that should be one of the main deciding factors for you, is if you just want to experience a tiny phone. And when I experienced this tiny phone for about a month or two, I kind of want to go back to this phone. And then when I go back to this phone, I want to go back to the mini phone. So I would just say, just try it. This is kind of like the Samsung Galaxy Note when it first came out. And it's just going the opposite direction, going into the mini direction. I think you'll like it. I think if you've opened this video and you're looking for this phone and you're thinking about a smaller phone, I think you should go for it. And I think it's a good experience to have. And I think you also need to consider the proprietary apps and features that are associated with iPhone. If you don't care at all for Apple Watch, Apple Fitness, iMessage, Apple Pay, AirPods integration, AirPlay, AirDrop, all these things, handover, then you probably shouldn't switch because you really don't, you're not using the full capabilities of this ecosystem and what they're trying to give you as a package. And if you're just comparing phone to phone, then I would say that it's not really a fair comparison. It's just everything about this is smaller and a little bit inferior, except for the speed. The speeds are great. So if proprietary apps and hardware are not part of your consideration, I would say don't get it. But if they are, if you're really wanting to switch back to iMessage and the Apple Watch and things like that, and you're kind of on the ball about getting a smaller phone, I would say go for it. It's an awesome phone. I think you'll really enjoy it. So thank you so much for watching. That does it for this video. If you liked it, please hit the subscribe button and give it a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next video. Oh yeah, and I forgot to mention, you don't get a charger. So you have to buy one of these. It's like 20, 30 bucks. It doesn't come in the box. You already know that. You've seen all the other videos. It's not a big deal. You just go buy this charger.